Captain Lee Jiho stood perfectly still as the alien princess moved around him like a predator studying its prey. His face showed no emotion, even though his heart was beating fast inside his chest. Princess Velthara was getting more and more angry, and everyone in the room could see it. The princess looked like she was made of living crystal. Her body kept changing colors, and right now she was glowing bright red, which meant she was furious. Jiho had learned this from the briefing files about her species. The Nexus Empire was the most powerful group in the galaxy, and they ruled through mind reading. Every alien species they had ever met could have their thoughts read like an open book. Every species except humans. "This is impossible," Princess Velthara said, her voice echoing strangely in the metal room. "I have read the minds of billions of beings across 1,000 worlds. I can hear the thoughts of entire planets at once. But you are like a blank wall." Jiho watched as she raised her hands toward his head. Strange blue energy began to flow from her fingers. This was her third attempt in the last hour to break into his mind. The first time had been gentle, like someone knocking on a door. The second time felt like someone trying to force that door open. This time it felt like she was trying to break down the entire wall. Lieutenant Kim Nari stood nearby, watching everything happen. She was the communications officer for the human delegation, and she was supposed to be taking notes. But right now, she was more worried about what might happen if this alien princess lost her temper completely. Nari had read the reports about what the Nexus Empire did to species that didn't cooperate with them. The princess's mental probe hit Jiho's mind and simply stopped. It was like watching someone throw a ball at a brick wall. The energy just bounced right off. Princess Velthara stumbled backward, her crystal body flashing through confused purple colors. "How are you doing this?" she demanded. "What technology are you using? What shields protect your thoughts?" Jiho shook his head, slowly. "We're not using any technology, Your Highness. We're not hiding behind any shields. This is just how human minds work." That answer seemed to make her even more upset. She began pacing back and forth, her crystal feet clicking on the metal floor. The sound echoed through the diplomatic chamber, like angry rain. The space station where they were meeting was supposed to be neutral territory. It belonged to no single species, and was meant for peaceful first contact between different civilizations. The walls were plain gray metal, and the only furniture was a simple table with chairs around it. Everything was designed to be non-threatening. But right now the room felt anything but peaceful. "Impossible," the princess repeated. "In 10,000 years of expansion across the galaxy, my people have never encountered a species we could not read. Mind reading is how we communicate. It's how we trade, it's how we rule. Without it, how do we know if you're telling the truth? How do we know what you really want?" Nari stepped forward carefully. "Your Highness, perhaps we could explain how human communication works. We use spoken language, written words, and body language to share information." The princess spun around to face her, and Nari felt a cold mental pressure against her mind. Just like with Jiho, it hit an invisible barrier and stopped. Princess Velthara's eyes went wide with shock. "You too," she whispered. "All of you are the same." The truth was starting to sink in. This wasn't just one unusual human. Every single member of the human species was mentally unreadable. In a galaxy where telepathy was the foundation of all advanced civilization, humans were completely immune to the most basic form of communication that existed. Princess Velthara began to glow brighter, cycling through colors faster than before. Her emotional state was becoming unstable, and that could be very dangerous. For everyone in the room, Princess Velthara was done playing nice. The next morning she brought in the big guns. Captain Jiho watched as a group of tall, pale aliens entered the diplomatic chamber. These weren't ordinary Nexus citizens. These were the Empire's elite mind readers. Their heads were larger than normal, with thick veins visible under their translucent skin. Each one wore a silver crown that hummed with psychic energy. "These are my royal telepaths," the princess announced, her crystal body still glowing with frustrated red colors. "Each one can read the thoughts of 1,000,000 beings at once. They have broken through the mental defenses of our greatest enemies." Sergeant Park Minho stepped up beside Captain Jiho. He was a big man with calm eyes and steady hands. "Ready for round 2, sir?" he asked quietly. Jiho nodded. "Let's see what they've got." The first royal telepath approached. His name was something unpronounceable in human language, full of clicking sounds and mental vibrations. He placed his long, thin hands near Jiho's head and closed his eyes. The air around them began to shimmer like heat waves rising from hot pavement. Communications Officer Choi Hana felt the pressure in the room change. It was like being underwater. Everything felt thick and heavy. She watched as the alien's face scrunched up in concentration. Sweat began to form on his pale forehead. His hands started shaking slightly. After 5 minutes, the telepath stumbled backward, gasping. I cannot find anything," he wheezed. "It's as if there is nothing there at all." "Impossible," Princess Velthara snapped. "Try the soldier." The same telepath approached Sergeant Minho. This time he used both hands and called upon 2 other telepaths to help him. 3 aliens now focused all their mental power on one human brain. The psychic pressure in the room became so intense that some of the equipment started making weird beeping sounds. Hana watched Minho's face carefully. The sergeant looked completely relaxed, like he was waiting for a bus. He even yawned once during the procedure. Meanwhile, the 3 aliens were sweating heavily and breathing hard. After 10 minutes, they gave up. "This is not possible," the lead telepath said, his voice shaky. "We are reading nothing. No thoughts, no emotions, no memories. It's like trying to read a rock." Princess Velthara's colors shifted to deep purple, the color of dangerous thinking. "Bring the ancient crystals," she ordered. Hana had read about these in the briefing files. The ancient crystals were legendary artifacts from the early days of the Nexus Empire. They were said to be powerful enough to break through any mental defense ever created. Most species considered them weapons of mass destruction. 4 aliens carried in a box made of some kind of black metal. Inside were 3 crystals, each one the size of a football. They glowed with their own inner light and made a low humming sound that seemed to vibrate through the bones. "These crystals have broken the will of entire planets," the princess said, her voice filled with dangerous pride. "They can reach into the deepest parts of any mind and drag out its secrets." The aliens set up the crystals in a triangle around Jiho. Energy began to flow between them, creating a web of crackling power. The whole room filled with a blue glow that hurt to look at directly. The sound got louder and louder until it felt like standing next to a jet engine. Then they turned it on full power. The crystals erupted with brilliant light. Energy poured toward Jiho from 3 directions at once. The metal walls of the room began to vibrate. Some of the weaker aliens in the room fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the psychic storm. But Jiho just stood there, looking mildly interested in the light show. The crystals began to smoke. The humming sound turned into an angry whine. One of the technicians shouted something in the Nexus language that probably meant "shut it down now." The crystals went dark, and several of them had cracks running through their ancient surfaces. Princess Velthara stared at the damaged artifacts, with her mouth hanging open. In 10,000 years, those crystals had never failed. They had broken the minds of gods and monsters, but they couldn't even scratch the surface of one ordinary human soldier's thoughts. "What are you?" she whispered, and for the first time, her voice sounded afraid instead of angry. Hana noticed that the princess had stopped attending her regular royal meetings. Reports were piling up on her desk, ignored. The Empire's business was grinding to a halt, while their leader became obsessed with solving the mystery of human minds. This was becoming bigger than just first contact. This was about to change everything. Princess Velthara wasn't sleeping anymore. Dark circles had formed under her crystalline eyes, and her once perfect royal appearance was starting to crack. She had been awake for 6 straight days, pacing her chambers and muttering to herself about the human problem. On the 7th day, she came to the humans with an offer that sounded too good to be true. "I will share our most advanced technologies with you," she announced to the human delegation. "Faster-than-light travel that doesn't require fuel, weapons that can destroy entire fleets with a single shot, medical technology that can cure any disease and extend your lives by centuries." Captain Jiho looked at Dr. Song Yunbi, the mission's chief medical officer. Dr. Song was a small woman with sharp eyes who had seen enough alien biology to know when something was wrong. She stepped forward with her arms crossed. "What do you want in return?" Dr. Song asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Just a few volunteers," the princess said, trying to sound casual. "I want to try some new scanning techniques. Completely safe, I promise. We just need to understand how your minds work." Dr. Song shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I've seen what your safe scanning techniques do. 3 of your own technicians ended up in the medical bay after trying to read our thoughts. I won't put my people through that." The princess's colors shifted to angry orange. "You don't understand. This is important. More important than a few humans getting slightly uncomfortable." "The answer is no," Dr. Song said. "And it will stay." "No." That's when Princess Velthara showed her true colors. The diplomatic mask finally slipped away completely. "Then I will declare humanity a psychic anomaly," she said, her voice turning cold and dangerous. "According to Nexus law, any species that poses a potential threat to galactic mental security can be quarantined indefinitely. You will be confined to this station until we figure out how your minds work." The room went dead silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Quarantine was just a fancy word for prison. They would be trapped here forever, becoming lab rats for alien experiments. Engineer Bae Hyunwoo had been working on the station's technical systems, trying to improve the human quarters. He was good with computers and electronic equipment, the kind of person who could fix anything with wires and circuits. But what he discovered in the station's monitoring systems made his blood run cold. "Captain," he said, pulling Jiho aside after the princess left, "we have a serious problem. I found hidden scanners in our sleeping quarters. She's been watching us around the clock." Jiho felt his stomach drop. "What kind of scanners?" "Psychic monitoring equipment," Hyunwoo explained, showing him the data on a small tablet. "Look at these readings. She's been trying to scan our minds while we sleep. The equipment has been running for 3 days straight, recording everything." The violations didn't stop there. Hyunwoo had found scanners in their bathroom facilities, their recreation areas, even their private communication rooms. The princess had been monitoring every moment of their lives, looking for any crack in their mental defenses. "She's studying us like lab animals," Hyunwoo said, his voice tight with anger. "And the worst part? The scans show she's been trying to influence our dreams. She's attempting to plant thoughts in our heads while we're unconscious." Captain Jiho stared at the data, feeling a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just curiosity anymore. This was something much more dangerous. He thought about everything he knew about galactic politics. Every major species in the galaxy was telepathic. They built their entire civilizations around mind reading. Their governments worked by sharing thoughts directly. Their militaries coordinated through mental links. Their economies ran on psychic trust and instant communication, and then humans showed up, completely immune to all of it. "She's not just frustrated," Jiho realized out loud. "She's terrified." Hyunwoo looked confused. "Terrified of what?" "Think about it," Jiho explained. "Her entire species rules the galaxy because they can read everyone's minds. They know when people are lying, when they're planning rebellions, when they're hiding resources. But humans, we're like walking blind spots in their perfect system." The implications were staggering. If humanity could hide their thoughts, they could plan in secret. They could lie to telepathic species without being detected. They could build hidden weapons, form secret alliances, or launch surprise attacks that no psychic being would see coming. To a galaxy built on mental transparency, humans weren't just strange. They were potentially the most dangerous species that had ever existed. "We need to get word back to Earth," Jiho said quietly. "Our people need to know what we're really dealing with here. This isn't first contact anymore. This is the beginning of something much bigger." Specialist Jung So-min had always been the brave one. Back on Earth, she was the soldier who volunteered for the dangerous missions, the one who stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. So when Princess Velthara announced she was developing new, more powerful scanning techniques, So-min surprised everyone by raising her hand. "I'll do it," she said simply. Captain Jiho turned to stare at her. "So-min, you saw what happened to their technicians when they tried to scan us before. This could be dangerous." So-min shrugged. Someone needs to find out what's really going on. Here, might as well be me. Dr. Song Yunbi was furious. Absolutely not. I won't allow any of my people to be guinea pigs for alien experiments. But Somin had already made up her mind. Doc, with respect, this isn't your choice. We need information, and this is the only way to get it. Besides, she grinned, I'm curious to see what happens when they really try to crack open a human brain. The next day, Princess Velthara led them to a new laboratory deep inside the space station. This wasn't the simple diplomatic chamber they'd been using before. This room looked like something from a science fiction horror movie. Strange machines hummed with power, and cables ran everywhere like electronic spider webs. In the center of the room sat a chair that looked more like a torture device. It was surrounded by dozens of crystal probes, each one glowing with its own color of psychic energy. The air itself seemed to vibrate with barely contained power. This is the deep mind scanner, the princess explained, her voice filled with dangerous excitement. It was designed to penetrate the mental defenses of our most stubborn enemies. It has never failed to extract information from any living being. Somin walked over to the chair and sat down without hesitation. Let's get this party started. The lead technician was a tall alien with 6 arms and too many eyes. He looked nervous as he began attaching the crystal probes to various points around Somin's head. Each probe hummed as it made contact, and the displays around the room began, showing swirling patterns of energy. Are you certain about this? The technician asked the princess in their clicking language. Do it, Princess Velthara commanded. The technician's multiple hands moved across the control panel. Power levels began climbing on every screen in the room. The crystals around Somin's head glowed brighter and brighter until they hurt to look at directly. Medic Lim Taehyun watched the energy readings from across the room. He was an expert in both human and alien biology, and what he was seeing on those screens worried him. Those power levels are getting dangerous, he called out, but the princess ignored him. More power, she ordered. The technician's eyes went wide with fear, but he obeyed. The crystals erupted with brilliant light. Energy poured toward Somin's mind from every direction at once. The sound in the room became deafening. Then something went very wrong. The psychic probe hit Somin's mind and bounced, but this time it didn't just stop. The mental energy reflected back along the connection, straight into the technician's brain. The alien screamed and fell backward, his body convulsing as electrical sparks shot from the scanning equipment. Smoke began pouring from the machines. Alarms started blaring throughout the station. Half the crystal probes cracked and went dark. The technician lay on the floor, unconscious and twitching. Somin sat in the chair, completely unharmed, looking around at the chaos with mild interest. Is that it? She asked. I barely felt anything. Princess Velthara stared at the destroyed equipment with her mouth hanging open. This machine could break through the mental defenses of gods and monsters. It had extracted secrets from beings with psychic powers beyond imagination, but it couldn't even tickle one ordinary human soldier. How? She whispered. Medic Taehyun knelt beside the unconscious technician, checking his vital signs. He'll live, but he's going to have a serious headache for weeks. He looked up at the princess. Your Highness, I think I understand what's happening here. Explain, she demanded. Taehyun stood up and brushed the dust off his medical uniform. You keep thinking that humans are using some kind of technology or artificial shields to protect our minds, but we're not. These barriers are completely natural. They're part of how human brains evolved. He gestured towards Somin, who was now examining one of the broken crystal probes with scientific curiosity. Humans evolved on a world where survival meant competing with other humans, Taehyun explained. For millions of years, the smartest humans were the ones who could hide their intentions, lie convincingly and keep secrets. The ones who couldn't do those things got eaten by predators or betrayed by enemies. Princess Velthara's crystalline form shifted through confused colors as she tried to process this information. Think about it, Taehyun continued. Every day humans practice deception. We tell small lies to be polite. We hide our emotions to avoid conflict. We keep secrets to protect ourselves and others. Children learn to do this before they can even walk properly. The truth was sinking in. Humans weren't hiding their thoughts on purpose. They were incapable of not hiding them. Mental privacy wasn't something they had learned. It was something they had evolved. Every human brain was naturally wired to maintain multiple layers of psychological camouflage. In a galaxy where telepathic species had grown soft and trusting over thousands of years, humans were the ultimate mental predators. The next day, Princess Velthara gathered her entire royal court to witness something unprecedented. Word had spread throughout the Nexus Empire about the mysterious humans whose minds couldn't be read. High-ranking officials, military commanders, and the Empire's greatest telepaths all crowded into the station's main conference hall. Captain Jiho stood in the center of the room, surrounded by hundreds of alien eyes. He looked remarkably calm. For someone about to reveal humanity's deepest secrets, "Your Highness," Jiho said, addressing the princess directly, "you want to understand how human minds work. I'll show you, but I need you to understand something first. What I'm about to demonstrate isn't special training or advanced technology. This is just how every human thinks, every single day." He gestured to cultural specialist Han Jiwon, who stepped forward carrying a small tablet. Jiwon was an expert in human psychology and sociology, the kind of person who understood why people behaved the way they did. "So let's start with something simple," Jiho said. "Princess, I want you to try reading my mind right now. Tell me what I'm thinking about." Princess Velthara focused her psychic abilities on Jiho's mind. As usual, she hit the invisible barrier and learned nothing. "I can't penetrate your thoughts at all," she admitted. Jiho smiled. "That's because I'm thinking about 17 different things at once, and I'm actively hiding most of them from myself," the aliens in the room murmured. In confusion, "How could someone hide thoughts from themselves? Watch carefully," Jiho continued. "Right now, part of my mind is focused on talking to you. Another part is analyzing the exits in this room, in case we need to escape. A third part is worried about my family back on Earth. A fourth part is planning what to have for dinner tonight. And underneath all of that, there's a part of my brain that's constantly monitoring my own thoughts, deciding which ones are safe to express and which ones should stay hidden." Cultural specialist Jiwon stepped forward to explain. "Every human child learns to do this before they turn 5 years old. We call it compartmentalization. It's like having multiple rooms in your mind, and you can close the doors between them whenever you want." She activated her tablet, showing simple diagrams that even the aliens could understand. A human child will tell their mother they cleaned their room while simultaneously planning how to hide the mess under their bed. They're not lying exactly. They're thinking in layers. The royal court was completely silent. This was beyond their understanding. "Let me show you something else," Jiho said. He turned to face the princess directly, and his expression changed completely. His eyes became warm and friendly, and his voice took on a respectful tone. "Your Highness, I want you to know how honored we are to be here. Meeting your people has been the greatest privilege of our lives." Several telepaths in the room tried to scan his emotions to see if he was telling the truth. As always, they found nothing. Then Jiho's expression changed again, becoming completely neutral. Now, I was projecting false sincerity while maintaining emotional distance and preparing for potential conflict. I meant some of what I said, but not all of it. Even I'm not entirely sure which parts were genuine. The aliens looked horrified. How could someone manipulate their own emotions so easily? Tactical Officer Yoon Gunho stepped forward. He was a military strategist who specialized in warfare planning. "Your Highness, what the captain just demonstrated is basic human social behavior. In our military, we assume that every enemy is doing this all the time." Gunho activated a holographic display showing human military tactics. "Our entire doctrine is built around the assumption that everyone is trying to deceive everyone else. We plan fake attacks to hide real ones. We spread false information to confuse enemies. We maintain multiple backup plans because we assume our main plans will be discovered." Princess Velthara's crystal body began flickering through colors rapidly, a sign of extreme distress. "You mean all humans do this all the time?" "Not just humans," Jiwon explained gently. "Every species that evolved through natural selection develops some ability to deceive. But most telepathic species lost these skills once they developed mind reading. They didn't need to lie anymore because everyone could hear their thoughts. Anyway, the horrifying truth was becoming clear. The Nexus Empire and every other telepathic civilization had become mentally weak over thousands of years. They had grown dependent on their psychic abilities and lost the basic survival skills that non-telepathic species took for granted. "We can't tell when people are lying to us," one of the royal advisors said, his voice shaking. "If someone doesn't have telepathic abilities, they could deceive us completely and we would never know." "Worse than that," Gunho added, "your entire military strategy assumes you can read enemy thoughts. Your economic system is built on psychic trust. Your government depends on mental transparency. But what happens when you face an enemy who can hide their intentions?" Princess Velthara sank into her throne, her crystal form now flickering between deep purple and black, colors that indicated fear and despair. For the first time in her life, she understood how vulnerable her civilization really was. Humans weren't just immune to telepathy. They were living weapons designed by evolution to exploit the exact weaknesses that telepathic species had developed. In a galaxy of open minds, the secretive species had become the ultimate predators. Princess Velthara didn't sleep for 3 more days after the revelation, but this time, instead of pacing angrily around her chambers, she was studying. Her royal quarters had been transformed into a makeshift library, filled with every piece of human psychological research she could get her hands on. "Fascinating," she muttered to herself, reading about something called poker faces and emotional masks. These humans had dozens of terms for different ways of hiding their true feelings. They had turned deception into an art form. The princess had made a decision that shocked her entire court. Instead of trying to defeat the humans, she was going to learn from them. Meanwhile, diplomat Shin Minji found herself in the strangest negotiation of her career. She sat across from the Nexus Empire's Council of Ministers, trying to explain concepts that their language didn't even have words for. "Mental privacy," she said slowly, "means that what goes on inside someone's head belongs to them alone. No one else has the right to read those thoughts without permission." The Nexus ministers looked at each other in confusion. One of them, an elderly alien with silver scales, raised his hand. "But how can we conduct business if we cannot verify each other's intentions? How do we know if someone is planning to cheat?" "Us?" Minji smiled patiently. "The same way humans have been doing it for thousands of years. We use contracts, we build reputations, we create systems of accountability. We learn to judge people by their actions, not their thoughts." Another minister spoke up, his mental voice trembling with worry. "But what about our children? How will we know if they are lying to us? How will we guide them if we cannot see into their minds?" "You talk to them," Minji explained. "You watch their behavior. You build trust through communication and shared experiences. It's actually much more meaningful when someone chooses to tell you the truth instead of having it read from their mind." The conversation was giving the aliens headaches. They had built their entire civilization around instant mental communication. The idea of not knowing what others were thinking felt like being suddenly struck blind and deaf. Back in the human quarters, intelligence analyst Kwon Do-hyun was giving Princess Velthara a crash course in human espionage techniques. Do-hyun was a quiet man who noticed everything and revealed very little. He was perfect for this kind of work. "The key to successful intelligence gathering," he explained to the princess, "is controlling what information you give away while collecting what you need from others." He demonstrated by having a casual conversation with one of her guards. Within 5 minutes, he had learned the guard's schedule, his family situation, his personal worries, and his opinions about recent political changes in the empire. The guard never realized he was being interrogated. "How did you do that?" Princess Velthara asked, amazed. "I asked questions that seemed innocent. I shared small pieces of information about myself to build trust, and I paid attention to what he didn't say as much as what he did say," Do-hyun explained. "In human intelligence work, we call this social engineering. It's about understanding psychology rather than reading minds." The princess was taking notes frantically. These techniques were completely alien to her people, but she could see how powerful they could be. Word of the human demonstration spread quickly throughout the galaxy. Within a week, representatives from a dozen different telepathic species had arrived at the space station, all asking the same question. Could humans teach them how to protect their minds? The Zephyrian ambassador was the first to make a formal request. His people looked like giant butterflies with jeweled wings, and they communicated through shared emotional states. Our species is facing a crisis, he explained to Captain Jiho. We recently encountered a non-telepathic species that has been infiltrating our government for years. We never suspected anything because we couldn't read their minds, and we assumed that meant they were trustworthy. Similar stories came from across the galaxy. The crystal-based harmonics had lost an entire colony world to a species that used their telepathic openness against them. The gas cloud whispers had been economically manipulated by traders who could hide their true intentions. Dr. Song Yunbi found herself overwhelmed with requests for psychological evaluations. These species have become so dependent on telepathy that they've lost basic survival instincts, she explained to the human delegation. It's like they've been living in a world where everyone's thoughts are visible, and suddenly they've discovered that some people can wear invisible clothes. Princess Velthara called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. For the first time in recorded history, mental privacy was added to the list of fundamental rights that all spacefaring civilizations had to respect. We must adapt, she announced to the assembled representatives, or we will become extinct. The galaxy is larger than we thought, and there are species out there who think differently than we do. We can either learn from them or be destroyed by them. The vote was unanimous. Every telepathic species in the galaxy agreed to begin studying human psychological defense techniques. The age of mental transparency was ending, and the age of strategic thinking was about to begin. But not everyone was happy about these changes, and some species saw opportunity in the chaos that was coming. Princess Velthara stood before the Galactic Assembly, but she looked nothing like the frustrated ruler who had first met the humans months ago. Her crystalline form now glowed with steady blue light, the color of wisdom and determination. She had spent weeks studying human psychology, and what she had learned had changed her completely. Honored delegates, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the vast assembly hall. I stand before you today to make a confession. I was wrong about the humans. We all were. Murmurs rippled through the crowd of alien representatives. The Nexus Empire never admitted mistakes. We thought the humans were hiding their thoughts from us, the princess continued, but the truth is far more significant. They aren't hiding something specific. They're hiding everything, all the time. It's not a choice they make. It's simply how their minds work. She gestured toward the human delegation, where Ambassador Park Yuna sat with quiet dignity. Yuna was an experienced diplomat who had spent her career dealing with difficult situations, but nothing had prepared her for negotiating the future of galactic civilization. The humans have agreed to share their knowledge with us, Princess Velthara announced. Together we will establish the first mental defense academy in galactic history. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembly. Some species were excited about the possibilities. Others were terrified about what this might mean for their way of life. Ambassador Yuna stood up to address the crowd. The Human Nexus Mental Defense Academy will be open to all species, she said in perfect galactic standard. We believe that mental privacy is a fundamental right, and we want to help other civilizations protect themselves. 3 months later, the academy opened on a small moon orbiting the Nexus capital world. The facility looked like a cross between a university and a military training center. Students from dozens of different species arrived daily, all eager to learn the mysterious art of mental defense. Instructor Oseojun found himself teaching the strangest classes of his career. He was a former military psychologist who specialized in stress management and mental resilience. But explaining basic human psychology to telepathic aliens required skills he had never imagined needing. Today, we're going to practice something called compartmentalization, he told his class of 20 alien students. They looked like a collection from a science fiction convention, tentacled creatures sitting next to crystalline beings with floating gas clouds hovering near insect-like warriors. I want you to think about something that makes you happy, Seojun instructed. Now, while you're thinking about that, I also want you to think about what you had for breakfast this morning. The aliens struggled with the concept. They were used to focusing on one thought at a time, letting their minds flow naturally from idea to idea. The notion of deliberately maintaining separate streams of consciousness was alien to them. A student who looked like a walking tree raised one of his branch arms. Instructor, this feels very unnatural. Why would anyone want to divide their thoughts this way? Because it gives you control, Seojun explained. When you can separate your thoughts into different compartments, you can choose which ones to share and which ones to keep private. You can have a conversation about one topic while secretly planning something completely different. The class looked horrified and fascinated at the same time. Meanwhile, the effects of the academy were spreading throughout the galaxy. Trade negotiations that used to take hours through direct mental contact now required days of careful verbal negotiation. Diplomatic relationships became more complex, as species could no longer simply share their thoughts directly. Ambassador Yuna found herself writing entirely new sections of galactic law. Mental privacy clauses became standard in every contract and treaty. The old system of psychic verification was being replaced by complicated legal documents and verification procedures. It's like the galaxy is learning to walk again, she explained to Captain Jiho during one of their weekly briefings. These species have been telepathically connected for so long that they've forgotten how to function independently. Some species adapted quickly. The warrior-like cracks actually embraced mental privacy as a tool for better military strategy. Hidden thoughts make for stronger battles, their general declared. But other species struggled. The harmony-loving Melodians nearly had a civil war when they could no longer share emotions directly. Families were torn apart as parents and children lost their psychic connections. Princess Velthara had become humanity's strongest supporter, but even she sometimes wondered if they had opened a door that should have stayed closed. Your species has given us a great gift, she told Ambassador Yuna during a private meeting. But it's also a terrible burden. We used to live in a world where everyone's intentions were clear. Now we must learn to navigate a universe full of secrets and hidden motives. Yuna nodded sympathetically. Welcome to being human, she said with a gentle smile. It's complicated, but it's also what makes life interesting. The galaxy was changing, and there was no going back. The age of universal telepathy was ending, and the age of strategic thinking had begun. Professor Kim Woo-jin stared at the empty classroom, wondering how he had ended up in this situation. 6 months ago, he was teaching psychology to human college students back on Earth. Now he was about to create the first mental defense curriculum for alien species who had never needed to protect their thoughts before. The challenge was enormous. How do you teach someone to hide their mind when they've spent their entire evolutionary history sharing it? Start small, he muttered to himself, writing lesson plans on a holographic whiteboard. Basic concepts first, then build from there. His first student was Princess Velthara herself. She had insisted on learning alongside the common citizens, sitting in the same classroom chairs, specially modified for her crystalline body, and taking the same tests as everyone else. Lesson 1, Professor Kim began, is about mental walls. Imagine your thoughts are like a house, and right now all the doors and windows are wide open. Anyone can walk in and see everything. We're going to learn how to close some of those doors. The princess raised her hand like a regular student. But, Professor, if I close the doors to my mind, how will I communicate with my advisors? I know what my people are thinking. You'll learn to open and close those doors deliberately, Kim explained. Instead of your mind being completely open all the time, you'll choose when to share your thoughts and when to keep them private. It was like teaching someone to breathe manually after they'd been doing it automatically their whole life. The first exercise was simple. Think about a red circle while talking about something completely different. For humans, this would be child's play. For telepathic aliens, it was nearly impossible. Princess Velthara spent 2 hours trying to discuss trade policies while visualizing a red circle. Sweat began forming on her crystal skin as she struggled with the concept. Every time she tried to split her attention, her natural telepathic abilities would broadcast both thoughts to everyone around her. "I can't do it," she said, frustrated. "My mind wants to share everything I'm thinking." "That's exactly the problem," Professor Kim said kindly. "Your species evolved to share thoughts for survival. Now you need to learn the opposite, to survive, by keeping thoughts hidden." Meanwhile, Security Chief Lee Subin was running a very different kind of class. Her students were elite bodyguards from various species, all trained to protect important officials, but they had never considered protecting against mental attacks. "Your job just got a lot harder," Subin told her class of alien warriors. "Before, you only had to worry about physical threats, weapons, explosives, assassins. Now you have to protect against enemies who can attack through the mind." She demonstrated by having one of the telepathic students attempt to scan her thoughts while she planned a fake security operation. The alien got nothing, of course, but Subin walked him through what a human security chief would be thinking in such a situation. "I'm simultaneously planning 3 different escape routes, analyzing the psychological profiles of everyone in the room, maintaining awareness of all possible hiding spots for enemies, and thinking about completely unrelated topics to mask my real intentions," she explained. The alien bodyguards looked exhausted just hearing about it, but the most disturbing discoveries came from researcher Nam Ji-hoon's investigation into galactic history. Ji-hoon was a specialist in alien archaeology and xenobiology. What he found in the ancient records made everyone's blood run cold. "We've been looking at this all wrong," he announced during a briefing with the human delegation. "We thought telepathic species were just vulnerable to deception, but they're actually vulnerable to something much worse." He activated a holographic display showing star maps with large red zones marked across them. "These are dead civilizations, entire species that went extinct in the past 10,000 years. The official records blame wars, diseases, or natural disasters. But I've found evidence of something else." The hologram zoomed in on one particular system. The Vorthak Empire controlled 300 star systems. Advanced technology, powerful military, billions of citizens. They disappeared overnight 5,000 years ago. The only clue was reports of mind sickness spreading through their population. Ji-hoon switched to another example. The crystal, hierarchies, the thought collective, the unity of minds. 7 major telepathic civilizations, all extinct, all with similar symptoms before they died out. Princess Velthara leaned forward, her colors shifting to worried purple. "What kind of symptoms?" "Mass insanity, violent behavior, complete breakdown of social order," Ji-hoon explained grimly. "But here's the terrifying part. I think these civilizations were attacked by psychic parasites, creatures that can invade telepathic minds and control them from within." The room went silent as the implications sank in. "The parasites spread through telepathic networks like viruses through a computer system," Ji-hoon continued. "Once they infected one mind, they could jump to any other mind that was mentally connected. Entire species could be wiped out in days." Captain Ji-ho asked the question everyone was thinking. "Are these parasites still out there?" Ji-hoon nodded grimly. "I found recent reports from frontier regions. Ships found drifting empty, crews missing but no signs of violence. I think we're dealing with active threats." "But why haven't they attacked Earth?" Dr. Song asked. The answer was obvious and terrifying. "Because they can't get into human minds," Ji-hoon said. "Our natural mental barriers make us immune. We're probably the first species they've encountered that they can't infect." Suddenly, humanity's role in the galaxy became much more important. They weren't just teachers. They might be the only species capable of fighting an enemy that could destroy entire civilizations through telepathic infection. Captain Ji-ho stood on the observation deck of the new human embassy station, watching. Ships from dozens of different species arrive and depart in endless streams. 2 years had passed since first contact, and the galaxy looked nothing like it had before humans arrived. He still couldn't quite believe how everything had changed. When they first left Earth, their mission was simple: make peaceful contact with alien civilizations and establish trade relationships. Nobody had expected humanity to become the galaxy's most important teachers. Through the transparent walls, he could see the Mental Defense Academy's newest campus floating nearby. What had started as a small experimental school had grown into A massive complex with thousands of students from hundreds of worlds. Every day new species arrived, begging to learn the ancient human arts of mental privacy and psychological protection. "Sir?" Lieutenant Kim Nari approached with a datapad. "The morning reports from Counselor Ryu are ready for your review." Jiho took the pad and scrolled through the updates. Counselor Ryu Hyejin had perhaps the most challenging job in the galaxy, helping telepathic species adjust to life with mental privacy. It was like teaching people to live without one of their primary senses. "How are the Melodians doing?" Jiho asked. The harmony-loving Melodians had struggled the most with mental barriers, since their entire culture was built around shared emotions. "Better than expected," Nari replied. "Counselor Ryu says they're starting to appreciate what they call emotional surprise. Apparently, when you can't read your partner's feelings directly, small gestures of love become much more meaningful." Jiho smiled. That was very human, finding joy in the uncertainty that came with privacy. The door chimed, and Princess Velthara entered the observation lounge. She looked completely different from the frustrated royal, who had first tried to scan human minds. Her crystalline form now moved with careful, measured steps, and her colors remained steady blue, the result of months of mental discipline training. "Captain," she said, "I wanted to personally inform you of today's announcement. The Galactic Council has approved the formation of the Mental Sovereignty Alliance." Jiho raised an eyebrow. "Mental Sovereignty Alliance?" "A mutual defense pact between species committed to protecting mental privacy rights," the princess explained. 47 civilizations have already signed on, with humanity as a founding member. We're not just protecting ourselves from psychic parasites anymore. We're protecting the right of every being to control their own thoughts. This was bigger than anyone had imagined. What started as a curiosity about human mental barriers had become a galactic revolution. A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission. Admiral Hong Mingyu appeared on the holographic display, broadcasting from the bridge of the newly commissioned Earth Defense Fleet. "Captain," Admiral Hong said, "I thought you'd want to know. We've just received our 15th request this month to mediate a territorial dispute. Apparently our unreadable minds make us the most trusted neutral party in the galaxy." Jiho shook his head in amazement. 6 months ago, the idea of humans as galactic peacekeepers would have been laughable. Earth barely had enough ships to patrol their own solar system. Now they were being asked to settle disputes between civilizations that had existed for thousands of years. "The Zephyrian-Krax border conflict?" Jiho asked. "Resolved yesterday," Admiral Hong replied with satisfaction. "Both sides trusted our mediators because they knew we couldn't secretly scan their negotiation strategies. It's amazing how much easier diplomacy becomes when everyone believes you're being honest." After the transmission ended, Princess Velthara moved to stand beside Jiho at the observation window. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had never met?" she asked. Jiho considered the question. "Honestly, I think your civilizations would have eventually been destroyed by the psychic parasites. You were all so vulnerable, so dependent on telepathy that you couldn't defend against mental attacks. And now? Now you're learning to think like humans," Jiho said with a slight smile. "Paranoid, secretive, always planning for the worst. It's not as pleasant as universal telepathy, but it's much safer." The princess's colors shifted to amused green. "My advisors tell me I've become insufferably suspicious since learning human psychology. I now question everyone's motives and plan for betrayals that will probably never come." "Welcome to the human experience," Jiho laughed. "We've been living like that for millions of years." As he watched the ships coming and going, Jiho reflected on humanity's strange journey to the stars. They had always assumed their greatest contributions to galactic civilization would be their technology, their art, or their scientific discoveries. Nobody had ever imagined that their most valuable gift would be their ability to lie, hide, and keep secrets. In a universe where every other species had evolved to share their thoughts freely, humans were the ultimate evolutionary anomaly. They were living proof that sometimes the best defense was simply being impossible to read. The galaxy was learning that mental privacy wasn't just about protecting secrets. It was about protecting the right to be individuals, to have private thoughts and personal dreams that belonged to no one else. Humanity had given the galaxy something it never knew it needed, the freedom to be alone inside their own minds, and in doing so, they had become not conquerors, but guardians of the most fundamental right of all, the right to think freely,